When I dialed Rosalind's number, I had just left the examination room at the hospital. A twisted ankle meant I needed a ride. The phone connected, but the sound of running water and a saccharine female voice drifted through. Hello? Rosalind's busy. The next call went straight to voicemail. I sighed, watching the bustling crowd in the hospital. Today marked the end of our 6-month wager. It was a game I had definitively lost. 6 months ago I met Rosalind. I pursued him relentlessly, my affection etched deep within my bones. He hadn't explicitly agreed to a relationship, but he hadn't rejected me either. We made a bet. I wagered he'd fall in love with me within 6 months. He accepted. Now the 6 months were up and the outcome was painfully clear. Rosalind was handsome, wealthy, and charismatic. Women flocked to him like moths to a flame. I too had been one of them. Perhaps he'd indulged my bet on a whim, but after all this time, his patience had finally worn thin. I stood there clutching my phone, the throbbing pain in my ankle finally eclipsing the ache in my heart. I gritted my teeth and hailed a cab home. Home in this case was Rosalind's apartment. Since things were over, there was no reason to stay. I began packing. It struck me how little I'd accumulated during our time together. I left behind all the jewelry and gifts he'd given me. If I was leaving, there was no point in clinging to souvenirs. I'd planned to slip away quietly, but when I opened the door, Rosalind was standing there. His sharp features were obscured by the dim hallway light, making it impossible to read his expression. "Where are you going?" he asked, his brow furrowing as he noticed my suitcase. For a long time, his gaze had held an almost magnetic pull. Today, however, I met his eyes without a flicker of emotion. "The 6 months are up. I concede. I'm leaving." His mouth opened, the muscles in his face tightening. "Willow, are you serious?" I nodded. He didn't try to stop me as I brushed past him. But perhaps it was the lighting, but his face seemed unusually pale and drawn. He was a stark contrast to the vibrant man I'd first met. Our paths had crossed during a classic damsel in distress scenario. He'd rescued me from a group of thugs in a bar, and I fell hard. He was dazzling. There wasn't a woman he couldn't charm. But his heart remained elusive. He saw so many faces, he cherished none. He gave no one his true affection. Yet, like a foolhardy moth, I dared to propose our wager. We'd been sitting on a park bench after fleeing the bar, both disheveled and breathless. The dim light cast a soft glow around him, and on a whim I blurted out, "We seem to have a connection. Want to give it a try?" Rosalind lit a cigarette, the red ember glowing between his fingers. It had only been 5 minutes since he'd pulled me away from danger, yet I could still feel the warmth of his hand, the slight roughness of his calluses. He'd scoffed. "Aren't you a little young for these games?" I wanted to retort that I was hardly a child, but instead I swung my leg over his lap, straddling him. It was the first time I'd been so close to such a handsome man. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my voice steady. "What's wrong with being young? Unless, are you scared?" Rosalind dropped his cigarette, his eyes wide. "You've got some nerve." I leaned closer to his ear. "I've got even more nerve than you think. How about a wager? I'm the prize. Win and I'm yours. Lose and I disappear from your life." Perhaps my audacity intrigued him. Perhaps my casual approach, free of clinging desperation, appealed to his unburdened nature. He agreed. My friends thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. I couldn't help but be drawn to the light he seemed to radiate. We moved in together quickly, spending our days in a whirlwind of faux coupledom. I loved hanging off him, clinging to his arm. Sometimes when I'd pushed him too far, he'd look at me intently, pull me close and playfully tease me, his voice husky. "Willow, stop it." Every time he was tender, I waited for him to say those 3 words. But they never came, not even as I walked away. Of course, everything has an expiration date. Once it passes, the novelty wears off. The night air was cool. The streets were empty. Memories surfaced one by one. I replayed our one-sided romance, slowly erasing it from my mind. I pulled out my phone and transferred 6 months' worth of rent to Rosalind's account, then promptly blocked his number. I texted my colleague Violet about finalizing a tricky contract we'd been working on. Dawn had broken by the time she arrived. She gasped at my injury. "Willow, you look stunning as always, but are you sure you should be working with a twisted ankle?" The sprain wasn't severe. It looked worse than it felt. "I'd be fine in a few days." I smiled. Let's get this prepped. My ankle should be healed by the time we negotiate next week. I want to lock this down. Violet looked impressed. No wonder you're a team leader at such a young age. You're amazing. I just smiled, almost forgetting how pragmatic I usually was. All my impulsiveness had been spent on Rosalind, slowly draining away over the past 6 months. As soon as my ankle healed, I was at the negotiating table. The talks weren't going smoothly. We had one last chance. A dinner with Mr. Quinton that evening. After dinner we moved to a bar. Mr. Quinton had a gleam in his eye. If you play your cards right, Ms. Willow, we have a deal. I knew what was expected. I calmly picked up my glass. Mr. Quinton, I appreciate your consideration. Excellent. Mr. Quinton looked even more eager, declaring that we should drink to a successful partnership. Perhaps it was the alcohol, but I felt a persistent gaze on me. Before I could locate its source, a hand plucked the glass from my grasp. The next second, Rosalind was sitting beside me. Mr. Quinton, what a coincidence. He was dressed impeccably in a suit, his tie slightly loosened. He was clearly here on business too. His lips were pressed together, his usual easy smile gone. I knew instantly that he was angry. As Mr. Quinton exchanged pleasantries with him, he learned that I was a good friend of Rosalind's. Good friend. A convenient label, open to interpretation. It was his classic deflection. Since we're friends, Mr. Rosalind, and since I find working with Ms. Willow so agreeable, this is quite the coincidence indeed. Let's have a drink. Rosalind intercepted the drink Mr. Quinton was pouring for me. His gesture brooking no argument. I'll drink with you. I swirled the remaining liquid in my glass, the coolness seeping through the crystal. I found the situation amusing. This was the first time Rosalind had ever shielded me from unwanted attention, and it happened after we'd broken up. My expression softened. I tilted my head back and drained the glass, considering it a final toast to our past. I owed him nothing. I wanted nothing more to do with him. The evening eventually wound down. After Mr. Quinton left, Rosalind stopped me at the exit. In the darkness, his expression was indistinct, but his hand gripped my arm, pulling me close. I could smell the faint scent of alcohol on him. Willow, what was with the rent money? I looked up at him, unflinching. A small gesture of gratitude. I couldn't very well live in Mr. Rosalind's apartment for free for 6 months. My words seemed to irritate him. He took a few deep breaths to compose himself. Come home with me. I'll take care of you. You don't need to endure these business dinners. I pulled my arm away, shaking my head. Rosalind, you truly don't understand. I went back to his apartment with him, only because he claimed I'd left some belongings behind. I'd asked him to mail them, but he'd called it too much trouble. Aren't you trying to disappear from my life? Then take everything tonight. His words, though softly spoken, hit me hard. All the tenderness, the seeming reluctance to let me go, had been a facade, a product of a less than sober mind. But stepping back into the apartment, it felt unchanged. It still bore the marks of my presence, just as I'd left it. The entryway I'd decorated, the curtains I'd painstakingly chosen, the carefully selected knickknacks. I'd been so afraid he wouldn't be comfortable during our 6 months together, fussing over every detail. Back then, I hadn't understood that a flawed destination renders any journey, however meticulous, ultimately pointless. The alcohol was catching up with me. He handed me a glass of honey water and went to take a call. The honey water gave me pause. When had Rosalind learned to be thoughtful? He'd lived a life of privilege, accustomed to having everything done for him. He wouldn't even bother to pick up a fallen vase. My emotions flickered, but I couldn't decipher his motives. I pushed it aside, texting Violet to pick me up. From the balcony, I could hear the faint, syrupy tones of a woman's voice, seemingly cooing at him. Rosalind's tense features relaxed. I took a sip of the honey water. It was sickeningly sweet, making my stomach churn. He ended the call and came to stand beside me. I have to go out. I met his gaze, my expression unreadable. To see the other woman, no doubt. He was as restless as ever. In that moment, I didn't want to waste another breath. I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. He stepped in front of me, his brow furrowed. I didn't say you could leave. Stay here tonight. The doorbell rang. I heard Violet calling my name. I wanted to laugh. I don't make a habit of staying out all night. Thank you for your generous offer, Mr. Rosalind. Perhaps my tone was too dismissive. Rosalind seemed momentarily stunned. I brushed past his outstretched arm and walked out. With Violet there, he couldn't force me to stay. He called something after me, but I ignored him. Violet was bursting with curiosity. Willow, he told you not to drink when you get home. Is he your boyfriend? I don't have a boyfriend. She opened her mouth to ask more, but I silenced her with a look. One more question and I dock your pay. Violet clamped her mouth shut, muttering something under her breath as she drove me home. I knew what she was thinking. My mellow mood lasted all of 6 months. Her words echoed in my mind like a warning. Losing myself like that. I wouldn't make that mistake again. After weeks of nonstop work, the sudden lull felt strange. Memories of the past 6 months played through my mind like a movie reel. Good, bad, happy, sad. I remembered it all with surprising clarity. The process of forgetting was like pulling thorns from my flesh. It hurt, but if I didn't remove them, the wounds would never heal. The company, pleased with the success of the recent deal, offered me a promotion and a training course at their headquarters. I started receiving texts from an unknown number. I knew it was Rosalind. He offered explanations. He'd been called away on business. He hadn't meant to abandon me, unblock his number. He'd explain everything in person when he returned. I ignored every message. Mutual friends tried to intervene, telling me that a reformed rake was a rare prize, that I should give him a chance. Exasperated, I left for my training early. The plane landed in an unfamiliar city. Here, surrounded by strangers, I finally felt a sense of relief. I gave myself a few days to wallow, then I would move on. I would be the Willow I knew. Composed, intelligent, and resilient. After the training, a networking event was held, bringing together industry leaders. I was among the invitees, an opportunity to forge connections for future collaborations. I hadn't expected to see Rosalind there. Across the room, a striking woman clung to his arm. I heard him call her Anya, his voice gentle. I watched them, the light suddenly too bright, making my head spin. Rosalind saw me and his face paled. Willow, what are you doing here? Anya turned, a smirk playing on her lips. So you're Willow. Fancy meeting you here. I recognized the voice instantly. It was the saccharine sweetness from the phone call. So this was Rosalind's business. That's her, Anya said to her circle of friends, her voice dripping with disdain. The one who was chasing after Rosalind. He never gave her the time of day. Imagine following him all the way here. The women turned their appraising, scornful gazes on me. I'd never felt so acutely aware of my loss. I'd wanted Rosalind's heart. I'd never cared about anyone else. I could handle losing. I wasn't about to fight another woman for a man's attention. I lifted my chin, offering them a faint smile. Anya, I have no designs on Rosalind. We have no relationship. There's nothing to chase after. It was true. I hadn't won the bet. Therefore, there was nothing between us. I shook my head and turned to leave, but a hand caught mine. The next second, a voice resonated through the room. Willow's my girlfriend. We're just having a little lover's quarrel. I froze. Rosalind had just claimed me as his girlfriend? In front of all these people? Senior executives, company directors, CEOs, he just said that? I couldn't deny the flutter of confusion. The unexpected surge of uncertainty in my chest. Wasn't this what I'd wanted? But now that it was happening, I felt none of the anticipated joy. The room fell silent. I could feel their stares, sharp and pointed. The sensation jolted me back to reality. A self-deprecating smile touched my lips. I finally understood. I wasn't happy, wasn't thrilled, because I wasn't in love with Rosalind anymore. My expression became impassive. I gently disentangled my hand from his, met his gaze and spoke clearly for everyone to hear. Mr. Rosalind's memory seems to be failing him. We broke up. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I turned and walked away without hesitation. From that moment on, I decided to sever all ties with the past. I planned to extend my stay, explore the city at my leisure. Then a frantic call from Violet sent me rushing home. Sensitive company data had been leaked. An internal investigation was underway, focusing primarily on my department. Suspicion quickly fell on me. I was, after all, the project lead. My boss looked at me with regret. He sighed and gestured vaguely. I know you weren't involved, but it would be best if you resigned. I understood his unspoken message. Ending the investigation with me would minimize the damage and appease the shareholders. I packed my belongings. Violet and a few colleagues saw me off, her eyes red-rimmed. This is outrageous. This isn't your fault, Willow. It's a setup. A setup. I frowned. Preoccupied with the investigation, I hadn't been following office gossip. The other colleagues tried to hush Violet, but she winked at me, signaling that she'd tell me everything downstairs. True to her word, she met me later. She was seething. Anya. That scene at the event. It went viral in the company chat groups. I saw Anya having dinner with Mr. Quinton. This is her doing. My mind raced. One of the board members, a major shareholder, was named Mr. Jiang. Was he connected to Anya? I could leave the company, leave the industry even, but I wouldn't leave under a cloud of suspicion. I made a decision. I would get to the bottom of this. I told Violet, I'm leaving town. I might not be back. The news of my impending departure spread like wildfire. Rosalind bombarded me with calls, even showing up at places I frequented, but I avoided him. My supposed departure had the desired effect. I didn't even have to seek Anya out. She came to me. We met at a cafe. She was impeccably dressed, the picture of poised victory, her eyes gleaming with smug satisfaction. I sighed. Since I'm leaving anyway, I'd at least like to know why. Anya took a slow sip of her coffee. I wanted Rosalind. That meant getting rid of you. He kept saying your name, even when we were together. He's so used to flitting from one woman to the next, he doesn't even realize how much he cares about you. I had to make you disappear before he figured it out. Mr. Quinton isn't just Rosalind's friend. He's mine too. It all clicked into place. I looked at her calmly. One last question. What's your relationship with Mr. Jiang? A flicker of surprise crossed her face. You aren't even going to ask about Rosalind? I smiled faintly. I'm serious. There's nothing between us. Anya looked bewildered. Mr. Jiang. He's my uncle. I nodded, rising to my feet. I looked down at Anya. Thank you for your honesty. And thank you for your arrogance. Unfortunately, you won't get to witness the downfall of your imagined rival. I held up a small recording device. The color drained from Anya's face. Anya had thought victory was hers, but she hadn't accounted for my desperation, my willingness to gamble everything on a single decisive countermove. I'd known she wouldn't resist the opportunity to gloat. She wouldn't expect a defeated opponent to pose a threat. I handed the recording over to the authorities, a wave of relief washing over me. The rest was up to the company. Mr. Jiang, it seemed, was about to face his own reckoning. Sinking into my sofa, I let my mind wander. Anya's furious expression flashed before my eyes. He kept saying your name even when we were together. He's so used to flitting from one woman to the next, he doesn't even realize how much he cares about you. I laughed softly. Months ago, those words would have filled me with elation. But now, after everything, I felt nothing. My words at the event, my conversation with Anya, they'd all been genuine. Unfortunately, no one believed me. My phone lit up. I declined the call. Rosalind was relentless, probably eager to explain himself. There was no point. This was over. We were done. The company, impressed by my handling of the situation, granted me an extended leave of absence and issued a company-wide commendation. Violet was overjoyed, already planning my welcome back party. She didn't know I had no intention of returning. I'd resigned. In less than a year, my perspective had shifted drastically. When I believed love was paramount, Rosalind shattered my illusions. When I thought my career defined me, a corporate conspiracy left me disillusioned and exhausted. I decided to travel, to explore the world until I found a new purpose. I looked forward to meeting a new Willow, a Willow unburdened by the past, ready for a fresh start. But as I carried my suitcase downstairs, I found a weary-looking Rosalind leaning against his car. He still held himself with an air of effortless cool, but the carefree charm was gone. He eyed my suitcase, pain flickering in his eyes. His voice was hoarse. Willow, are you really leaving? I could lie to Violet, but not to Rosalind. I knew how perceptive he was. I met his gaze. He managed a weak smile. Let me drive you. It's hard to get a cab here. I sighed. Fine. He talked incessantly during the drive. He reminisced about our first meeting, about the days we'd spent together. He called them precious memories, memories he hadn't forgotten, though he'd realized their significance too late. I remained silent, not out of spite but because it all seemed so irrelevant now. My feelings for Rosalind had ignited quickly and intensely, driving me to reckless abandon. But that wasn't necessarily a good thing. It's easy for a woman to fall hard, for her affections to peak early. The rest of the journey becomes a slow descent, a gradual waning of love. Lucky lovers stay in sync. Unlucky ones drift apart. I wasn't one of the lucky ones. My silence seemed to agitate him. He slowed the car as if trying to prolong our time together. But even the longest roads eventually reach their end. We arrived at the airport. He slumped over the steering wheel, all pretense of pride gone, his voice thick with emotion. "Willow, please don't go." I shook my head, opening the car door and stepping out. This time I didn't let him carry my bag. I stood before him, offering a small smile, watching as his eyes filled with tears. "Rosalind, you have to understand. You missed your chance. No one waits forever." I turned and walked away. He called my name softly, but I didn't look back. As the plane soared through the sky, I looked out at the clouds, finally exhaling. It was over. Traveling was liberating. I met fascinating people, experienced new cultures, and slowly found a sense of peace. Violet, having learned of my resignation, called to berate me, extorting a promise of a lavish meal in exchange for a piece of news. "Mr. Jiang has been arrested. Apparently he's facing a long list of charges." I wasn't surprised. The business world was a battlefield. Winners took all. He lost, and others were eager to capitalize on his downfall. I hadn't expected to run into Anya again, of all places, on a hiking trail. She looked haggard, a stark contrast to her previous glamorous self. Her skin was pale, her eyes filled with a venomous hatred. I was standing on a steep incline when she approached, her demeanor frantic. "It's all your fault, Willow. You ruined us." I frowned, a sense of foreboding washing over me. Before I could respond, she lunged. My mind went blank. Only one thought remained. This is it. This is how it ends. The slope below was littered with rocks and jagged branches. The fall would be brutal. But the expected impact never came. Strong arms caught me, pulling me into a warm embrace. Before I could react, a scream pierced the air, followed by a dizzying sensation of tumbling. I rolled and rolled, held tightly, shielded from the rocks and branches. Groans of pain reached my ears. "Rosalind." His back hit a tree with a sickening thud. We finally stopped. I scrambled up, frantic to assess his injuries. He lay motionless on the ground. I had a few superficial cuts, but Rosalind was badly hurt, slipping in and out of consciousness. I called for help, slapping his face lightly. "Stay with me. Help is coming. Don't you dare fall asleep." He grasped my hand, his words slurred. "You're okay. That's all that matters." Panic seized me. If something happened to Rosalind because of me, I could never repay that debt. The paramedics arrived quickly, transporting us to the nearest hospital. Outside the operating room, my mind raced. The company's swift action, Anya's desperate act of revenge, Rosalind's reckless intervention. I'd left to escape all of this, and yet here I was back where I started. Even if I didn't love him anymore, he'd been injured protecting me. I couldn't abandon him. I had to stay. Rosalind's surgery was successful. His external injuries were treated, but the impact to his head and body required extensive recovery and constant monitoring. I was the only one there to care for him, so I resigned myself to the task, tending to his every need, slowly repaying my debt. Even wrapped in bandages, he tried to reassure me. "These injuries look worse than they are. Don't worry." I shoved a piece of apple into his mouth, none too gently. "Save your breath. Rest." Who cared? I just wanted him to recover quickly so he could go back to charming other women and leave me alone. He smiled weakly, a familiar tenderness returning to his eyes. "I'll do as you say. It's like old times. It's nice." Once he regained consciousness, Rosalind became relentlessly clingy, convinced I wouldn't leave him in his vulnerable state. "Let's start over. I'll do whatever you say. Just say yes." I slapped his leg hard. His face contorted in pain. I smiled coldly, my voice devoid of warmth. "Don't flatter yourself. I'd do this for anyone. If the mailman had been injured protecting me, I'd be taking care of him too." The light in Rosalind's eyes dimmed, replaced by a look of cautious uncertainty. I'd never seen that expression on his face before. In that moment I believed him. He loved me. His discharge date finally arrived. I breathed a sigh of relief. I no longer owed him my life. After his near-death experience, Rosalind seemed to accept defeat, no longer mentioning the past. As I said goodbye, I told him, "You don't need to follow me anymore. Anya's been arrested. I'm not in danger." He paused, a wry smile touching his lips. "You knew I was following you?" I nodded. "Since the beach." Rosalind was clever, but so was I. Divorced from romantic entanglements, everything became clear. He couldn't fool me. I hesitated, then pulled him into a hug. "Rosalind, you deserve better than to pine after me. Goodbye." He suddenly looked up as if making a decision. "Willow, I'll trade my life for one question. No matter the answer, we'll call it even." I stared at him, bewildered. What question could possibly be worth his life? Rosalind, the shrewd businessman, making such a reckless bargain. He pulled a small box from his pocket and knelt down, his expression earnest. "Willow, I know you don't trust me anymore. Let me prove it to you. Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in my eyes. I'd waited for this, but it was too late. Rosalind's eyes were filled with longing as he reached out to slide the ring onto my finger, as if that simple act could erase everything that had happened. But as he moved forward, I instinctively stepped back. That small distance shattered his remaining courage. His face crumpled, a mixture of grief and despair. "Willow, even after all this, it's not enough?" His voice was almost a growl. "Willow, even criminals get second chances. Why can't I?" He lowered his head, as if unwilling to let me see his tears, his vulnerability. I shook my head. "Rosalind, don't you understand? It's not about second chances. I don't love you anymore. I don't love you. That's why I can't accept this." A long silence stretched between us before he finally spoke. "I understand." He nodded, his face devoid of its usual spark, replaced by a quiet resolve. "I'll keep this ring. You may not love me, but you can't stop me from trying to win you back." I rubbed my temples, exhausted. "Do what you want." I turned and walked out, continuing my journey. Rosalind didn't follow. It was a relief. Travel was a balm to my soul. I encountered countless stories, fascinating people, and vibrant cultures. I began documenting my experiences, sharing them with the world, and quickly gained a following. This was my new calling, and I embraced it with passion. The constant movement was tiring, but my spirit felt renewed. I met other men, of course. In Inner Mongolia, I'd made plans to go horseback riding with Amu, a skilled horseman. But when I arrived at the grasslands, I saw a familiar figure. I stared at the two men, the tension between them palpable, and groaned inwardly. "Rosalind, what are you doing here?" He looked at me with exaggerated hurt. "I settled my affairs and came to find you, and you're..." He glared at Mu, who retorted defensively. Willow was about to agree to be my girlfriend. Could these men be any more presumptuous? Exasperated, I swung myself onto a nearby horse. "You two seem perfect for each other. Best of luck." I kicked the horse into a gallop, leaving them behind. The sound of pursuing hooves and shouted protests faded as the wind whipped through my hair. I felt a sense of exhilarating freedom, as if I could fly. The vast grassland stretched endlessly, embracing everything, embracing me, embracing everyone. Everyone had their own version of happiness. Mine was found not in romantic love, but in the boundless freedom of the open road. The inn,